Perfect. Well, welcome everyone. Hope you're all having a great morning, afternoon, evening. Yeah, today we'll be taking you through a quick course through the Intro to Framer workshop. I'm Raymond, and I'll be one of the co-hosts for today's session. And join with me is Irem or Irem. We'll be a host for the day, and yeah, we'll be able to kind of like help you guys walk through what Framer is, the best practices, and also teach you guys how to, build a website either from scratch or either from Figma, as we are coming from a background of a lot of designers on our end. Um, and yeah, in any case, let's get started. So in today's agenda, intros, we'll get to know you guys. We'll love to set out some polls very soon about everyone's like proficiency in Framer or Figma, as well as some no-code tools as well. We'll do a quick Framer interface refresher. Hopefully you guys got the email that was able to walk through the interface, but if you did not get the chance to, I will take my time a bit today to quickly go through how to navigate it, as well as some similarities. So that's like, what's the similarities between what we currently use, which is Figma, and Framer as well. Some best practices and what we're building. And then we're gonna go into setting up a design system in Framer. We'll do a quick demo, and this will be Irem's portion, where she will walk through the Figma to Framer plugin itself, as well as some do's and don'ts when importing your design onto Framer. And then finally, I'll come back in to show you guys how to build the design in Framer itself, as well as any potential like mobile optimizations that you may add. And if we have time, we'll touch on some animations. So yeah, the first thing I'd like you guys to do is would love to know more about your proficiency in Figma. We have a little QR code over here, or we do have this to get started. And so I see the post is being posted, and it seems like a lot of you guys are part of the intermediate part, but yeah, we'll let this run in for a while and should definitely learn more about our audience first before we get started. And so this is an intro course. Don't feel pressure to be like a pro at any of these tools. The opportunity here is for us to learn and for us to have fun while learning together as well. So yeah, it seems like people are mostly in like the beginner intermediate subspace, which is great. I feel like you don't need to be a professional per se to be able to transfer like your current designs to Framer itself. And yeah, that's great to see. The next question we have would be, what platform do you build your portfolio on? So whether that's like Wix or Squarespace or Webflow, we'll be posting a link for that as well, because we'd love to know what's like the most popular kind of platform that people are using right now. So I see a lot of Wix and Webflows. I did try to get into Webflow a bit earlier for sure. Like Zasha mentioned, I have used it before. I do think that learning it is definitely a bit steeper than what we'll be able to teach you today with Framer. And so it's really exciting to see a lot of people kind of like jumping in between platforms itself. I see some people doing Figma as well. Okay, GitHub. All right. I'll be hearing about coders in the house. Bootstrap. Perfect. Coder React. All right, cool. Yeah, we got some design developers here. Yeah, and some Notion as well. True. Very popular nowadays. You just put everything in. Squarespace, I see that as well. Perfect. Yeah, and then finally, the last question we have for you guys is, what's your biggest struggle with the platform? We'd love to, capture all of this as much as possible in our session today. We might not get to everything, as Lasha mentioned, as we have limited time. However, we'd love to learn more about what's like the biggest struggles, so I can maybe walk through those steps with you guys today. So that will be our third question. Not enough customization, true. I see that a lot with Squarespace and those, I guess, websites that have a bit more of a templated design. Coding is annoying, real. I mean, yeah. Personalization, that's true. Yeah. I think there's a struggle of between like, I want to get this fast, I want to get this out of there, but at the same time, I want to make it mine. And, like templates make it really fast, but at the same time, you don't want your portfolio to look too templatey. Responsive design, okay, perfect. That is something we'll touch on today. Um, yeah, so it seems like customization is a really big thing. Responsiveness, um, the learning curve. I assume that's what curve means. Mm-hmm. Takes a long time. True, true, true. Oh, cool. Loading's around 1 minute. Because it's embedding large 3D scenes. Yeah, that's definitely something to consider when building a site. It's like if it's too heavy, it might take way too long for it to open and stuff. Cool. Well, thanks for all your answers, everyone. And so yeah, we'll get started. Before we start, would love for everyone to kind of open up like a Framer account. If you haven't already, we do have some templated files that we have sent in for you, and would love for you guys to join us in this process as we'll be building it with the files we're sending you. We are using a custom font, so if that's like through an email or whatnot, um, that's where you'll find the font itself. So if you haven't already, do check your email, as we did send that out to everyone. And then finally, we have the Figma to Framer plugin. So if you have your Figma open, just type Figma to Framer, or I think it's called like Figma to HTML or something like that, to get that installed in. So we'll go at a pace, hopefully, that everyone can follow. But if we're going a bit too fast, then don't worry, because this whole session is going to be recorded, because the Dubstack team is here to help with us. Yeah, so we have some disclaimers. Do keep in mind, we're not really big experts at the end of the day. Like some things may or may not snap like one-to-one, but we'll definitely try our best. So yeah, like the slides mentioned, it's okay if you fall behind or miss a couple of steps, don't worry. This is all being recorded, so you can always come back, play things in a bit slower pace. And finally, yeah, we won't cover everything. Like the whole CMS portion of Framer is a bit of a heavier topic. We're just here to try to build a really nice looking but very simple site that you can definitely customize at your own time. And yeah, if you take a look at the chat, Irem there has posted the font as well, so you can get that installed. So let's keep this short. Let's start off with our interface walkthrough. So once you are in your Framer file, the first thing you ever see is this. You currently have the functions on the top, and this is where you have your file menu. So that's like going to your dashboard, saving files and whatnot. All of these are keyboard shortcutted, so don't worry, you'll be able to learn these very soon. The insert panel is quite simple. It basically helps you add new pages, new sections, new navigations that Framer has built in for you. So let's say you just want a landing page, you can just add one right away. So it does make your process a lot faster, but at the same time, it does open kind of like ways that you can customize those. CMS, we won't touch on too much. And then finally, you have elements. So for example, you can like drag in like a clock. You can drag in some media like images or GIFs. You can drag in some forms as well. Icons, interactive elements like search bars, any social media stuff. And finally, like little utility stuff like code block or embeds. So as you can see, it already has quite a lot of it going on when it comes to building the bare bones. And then next you have layout. This is where you'll be popping in your frames. So if you're a designer, everything is within a frame. F for frame just builds a blank canvas that you can use anywhere, but all the rows, columns, and grids are essentially frames that have some logic to them. If you're coming from Figma, it's essentially adding auto layout to it. And then you can drop in an image or video as well. And then you have text here. By default, T is your text button. So you don't really need to click on this. You can just press T. You can type anywhere you want. And then you have CMS, which you won't touch on too much. And then finally, you have actions, which is the quick action bar. You can also use Control or Command K to pop that up. On the left here, you have pages, layers, and assets. So pages are essentially the pages of your web page. So that's like home or about page. And you just add a new one by pressing the plus. We'll get to that very soon later. We have layers, which essentially is how the design elements are being put on the page itself. And then we have assets. So assets come in many different ways, one of which is components. So it's like buttons or things that you see a lot within pages that you want to keep consistent. So that's a navigation bar, for example, or like buttons or cards. And then you have the styles. So on your file, you will have these styles made for you. And yeah, we'll be using those very soon. So let's get started with a bit of a text so I can kind of like show you guys how it works. So let's say I have this hello in my design space. By default, it does give you a desktop screen, but you can always click on the plus here and add a phone version. And let me show you guys what the right panel does. So once you have something within your designs, on the top right, you have the alignment. So that's like left, middle, right align. Linking it essentially links it to different like pages, or let's say you want to link it to open a PDF. Positioning is essentially where it's positioned based on what the parent or canvas is. And then if you click into this, you have different types of positioning that you can put. By default, it's set to absolute, which is just a fancy word of saying you can put it anywhere. You can make it to fixed or sticky, or if it's in a auto layout / stack, they call it, it becomes relative, which I'll show you guys very soon. Yeah, and I can do that right now. So essentially, if I go to layout and go to rows, I can pull up these two and it makes two rectangles. So as you can see, as I move this around, it's not really snapping onto anything. It's because this is within a stack. So if you're coming in from Figma, this is essentially a frame that has logic, in this case, auto layout within it. If I want to move things up and down, I can click on the Docker frame, and then I move this down, and it basically replaces it. By default, this is set in kind of like relative position. So that means it's relative to the other items around it. If I change this to, let's say, absolute, I can move this wherever I want. But as you can probably tell, it definitely isn't the best thing to do if you want things to look nice and neat. So let's reverse that action. And then, yeah, the biggest thing to really note for stacks is essentially the layout portion over here. So in this case, it's set to a stack and it's set to a vertical direction. If it's set to horizontal, it'll essentially do left and right instead of up and down. By distribution, they just mean like where does the elements come from? So that's like the start or the center or the end. And then alignment. And then if you want it wrapped or not. The gap is essentially the gap between these two elements. So by default, it's set to 10. We can do like 100, and there's a larger gap in between. And then finally, you have padding, which is essentially the spacing around this element. If you do 20, you'll essentially get 20 padding around it. But you can click on this thing and adjust it for each direction. So that allows you for more flexibility. Back to a text layer, if you want to play around with the size, you can do that for the width, the height, how it grows. So right now it grows as per kind of like the length itself, but you can kind of like auto adjust the height, and essentially anything that goes in will kind of overflow to the bottom, or you can just fix it, and yeah, it's a fixed size over here. Effects is kind of like animations, which will not really go in too much into detail today, but we will. A little bit of And then we have stuff like overlays, which is more like visual stuff. Custom cursors, which is very new with Framer recently. If you want your page to have a custom cursor, you can add that in. Styles, by default, you have opacity and visibility, so you can just turn this off or on, or turn this lower or higher, but you can always click on the plus to adjust different things. So I do encourage you guys to explore that a bit more. Transforming is basically like playing around with your designs a little bit. So very much like Photoshop, you can skew something, and let's say do like 45 degrees, it's skewed to 45 degrees over there. And then finally, you have the text. You have the style here, which we'll get to very soon. What the content here says, what the font is, the weight, and then the color, and then any sizing in terms of pixels, or you can change it to fit. The lettering, which is like the kerning, so you can make letters like thinner or a bit more spaced apart, and then the line height. And then you want in left or right align. Scroll section is mostly just for sections that you're scrolling through, which you won't get into too much. And then finally, you have like accessibility options or any particular code overrides. So that was just a quick refresher on the interface. But yeah, I definitely kind of encourage you guys to explore all the options a lot more. And yeah, before we get started, let's take a look at some similarities or differences between Figma and Framer itself. So one of the biggest kind of similarities between the two is that they are a design first interface. So if you're coming from Figma or any design tool for that matter, a lot of the tools themselves are very familiar to you. So, you know, shapes, frames, stacks in this case, as well as like elements that align, like padding. These are very familiar elements to kind of designers that come from Figma. Other than that, they also handle prototyping and animations. Framer does kind of allow for more customizable animations for sure, but Figma has been getting there slowly. At the same time, color and text styles, very important to keep your designs consistent, as well as components. So components here kind of allow for that consistency within your designs. Some key differences is Figma itself is mostly for product and handoff. So it's like a app building tool, whereas like this is purely more for web design. Coding is kind of required for the product end to kind of make things work. But since Framer is a purely no-code web design tool, once you build it and you export it, it's already a functioning website, which is kind of like the biggest magical point. And yeah, finally, the animations where Figma is a bit more simple. There are more customizable options with Framer. But yeah, so that'll be my portion for now. I'll definitely be back, but I will hand my portion over to my co-host Irem, where she will walk through our designs and what we're going to be covering today.
Hey guys, nice to meet you. Raymond, that was an excellent introduction to the interface. Really appreciate that. As I mentioned, there is like a video that I put, you should definitely watch it. And yeah, if you want to see more content like this, maybe you should subscribe too. So yeah, let's just get started with a walkthrough of our design. What we're going to be building today is a little portfolio site for a designer called Dana Parker. So it's just going to be super simple. I'm mainly going to be building the homepage using the Figma to Framer plugin, and Raymond is going to be building the About page. So if you were to take a look at the homepage, this is just our regular hero section. We were really inspired by the trend of neo-brutalism. We just wanted to include these, you know, pastel colors, all these cute illustrations. Below the hero section, we have our hobbies section. We didn't want to go to project sections just yet. Below this section, we're going to have our little projects, our case studies. So we were inspired by like a design of like a retro kind of radio. And then at the bottom, we just have our regular footer section. I think Raymond is going to build this page, but it is very straightforward. We have our regular hero section. how did I get into design, my design journey, etc. And then design approach, philosophies, some of our cool design friends. Well, some of them are actually in this workshop, in their attending, so that's awesome. In our regular footer section with another cute illustration. So before we actually start using the Figma to Framer plugin, I highly recommend that you do install it. So let me just actually put this in the chat too. Yeah, there you go. Ideally, you should, install this in your Figma. I think, there you go. You should all have access to the Figma design here. Let me actually share this too. Sorry, there you go. If you've not received the email or you do not see the email in your box for a reason, yeah, you should. Oh, wait a second. It didn't copy properly. Sorry, I apologize. Oh, there you go. You should have access to it now. Yeah, if you want to follow along with me, you're more than free to do that. But one thing we're going to get started with is going to be implementing our style guide. So you're going to be at like, oh, I already have everything in Figma. Why don't I just like import this design into my Framer file? Well, again, we're super transparent. If you were to import these designs right away, as you see, I have like all my styles assigned, all my like headings, etc., which is good, but this is all done in Figma. If you were to import this into Framer now, Framer is not going to automatically detect that this is heading 1 or this is like the body large component, etc. So what we want to do first is perhaps having like a style guide also implemented in Framer. So to keep things short and sweet, we implemented most of these. So these are all of our colors. We did add these as styles here. I'm just going to quickly show you how to add the type colors, like the colors we use are for our text. And I'm also going to show you how you can make these text styles. Like I said, we did most of it ahead of time, because otherwise, if you were to, implement all of these, it would take us a lot of time. So let's just get started actually. What I'm going to do is I'm going to basically select this frame that holds all these colors for my text. I am going to go over to this menu. I'm going to go over to plugins. I'm going to select Figma to HTML with Framer. I do that. You do need to click on this, copy to clipboard. And then what I'm going to do is with this frame selected, this is for, the name is just called type colors. I'm going to paste it over. So let's see, it's looking a little janky, which is completely fine. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to perhaps click on this rectangle that has the color already applied. And what happens sometimes is when you're importing designs from Figma into Framer, the colors, etc., they are not captured perfectly. See, this color is actually this like hex code 24, 24, 24, but here it says 23, 23, which is not right. So I'm going to change that. And then I'm going to click on this plus button to add my style. So this is going to be our main black color. The next is going to be the colors we mainly use for our body and heading text. So let's just select this, make sure that it is the right hex code. It is the right hex code. I'm going to click on plus. I'm going to say charcoal. Hi. Let's do that quickly for others. If I'm going fast, please do let me know and I can slow down a little bit. So this is going to be charcoal medium. And then this is going to be charcoal low. Okay, excellent. So technically, it is very easy to create these color styles in Framer. They just make it super easy for you to, add colors and then create these colors you can use globally in your designs. So let's just take a look at our text styles. As I said before, we did add these ahead of time. So as you see, when I like hover over this, click on it, if you go over to styles panel, it'll say heading 1. We even did the mobile version too. So what I would recommend is ahead of time, you do create these styles before you actually import the styles into Framer. It's going to save you a lot of time, make sure that everything is consistent, not just in Figma, but also in Framer. So how do you actually create these text styles in Framer? So as I said, we created most of them, but not all of them. So I'm going to go over and then I'm going to click on this body text. I'm going to go over to styles and I'm going to say new style, paragraph, and it is already created for me. See, this is actually 24 pixels. The line height is 120%, and Framer already captures it, which is super nice. One thing that I don't necessarily like about Framer is for some of these more custom text styles like body medium, body large, you do need to create these a little bit manually. So if you were to go over to, let's just say, select body medium and then click on new style, you only get to see these predetermined or default text styles, which is perfectly fine, but ideally there's a better way to add these custom text styles. So in order to add the body medium, what I can do is we can do this a little bit manually. So I'm going to go over to my styles panel. I'm going to duplicate this body style I created, duplicate it and go into edit. And then it'll be 28 pixels. And it should be 150% line height. And then I can also change the name by right-clicking and then saying something like body medium. So I'll do the same thing for body large. Just bear with me. So I'm just going to change the name. And then it should be 32 pixels. There's a bit of an issue. Sometimes Figma Framer doesn't necessarily capture all the details properly, so you might want to double check. So if you were to take a look at what I'm seeing, the line height is actually supposed to be 150%, not 120%. So you do need to double check that. Let's see if we've done these. No, let's just do the mobile versions very quickly too. So I'm going to do the exact same thing. So duplicate this. I'm going to call this a mobile body. And then it'll be, just going to edit. It'll be 14 pixels, body medium. Let's go over and select body medium, duplicate it. It should be 16 pixels. So let's go back. Let's do body large very quickly. Duplicate. Large. And it should be 18 pixels, which is good. Let me change the body medium to, oh, wait a second. Sorry, just give me a second. This should say mobile body. Otherwise, it's going to get really confusing. That's one of the things I don't necessarily like about Framer. It's a little finicky to like change all of these names. Rename. Okay. That's perfectly fine. So yeah, if you were to take a look now, you get to see that we have all of our text styles and all of our colors. What I want to show you is, we mentioned that in Framer, you get to have the opportunity to create components like you can create them in Figma. So maybe let's just do that very quickly. So if you were to take a look at our Figma designs, I'm not going to build all of these buttons, but I'd like to build some of them for Raymond to use when he's building the About page as well. So perhaps let's just get started with building this guy. Let's go over to our Framer again. And then it'll be something like button text. Or no, let's just do this first. Let's just add a frame first. Our radius is going to be 44 pixels. And then I think our color is going to be, I believe it's this orange. Yeah, we're just going to select this orange from our panel. And then I'd like to add a border. So the border is going to be like 4 pixels, and then our color is probably going to be this charcoal color. You can also easily add these shadows, and they also even have like realistic shadows, which is super nice. Let's do this very quickly. Let's add this drop shadow. Yeah, I think so far it's looking good. What I want to perhaps do is add a layout to this so that we do have consistent padding on different sides. So if you were to go back to my Figma file, okay, there you go. It's 20 pixels at the top and bottom. And then on the right and left, we do have 48 pixels. Now I'm going to add my button text. I think it should be 20 pixels. There we go. And it should be semi-bold. See, it's just super easy to create all of these buttons, button designs. I'm also going to show you very quickly how you can componentize these very easily. So they should be 20 pixels. The line height is something like 120 pixels. This should be semi-bold. Excellent. So as you see, if I were to like keep typing, it just looks a little janky. So what I'm going to do is, in order to avoid that, I'm going to make it so that the width is set to fit content so that we don't run into that issue again. And actually, let's see, we can also do the same thing for the frame that holds this content. I believe the width is set to fit content, and then I'm also going to set the height to fit content. Yeah, and what I want to do now is I want to turn this into a component. How do I do that? I'm going to select this guy. Oh, actually, let's just change the name directly in the panel. It'll be like button. I'm going to right click. Sorry, just give me a sec. And then I'm going to, it's actually easy to do it in the layers panel. I'm going to, go into layers, find a button that I want to make into a component. I'm going to right click, and then I'll pick create component. It'll just be button, whatever name you give it, and then it is already created. So like Framer does this weird thing where it just says variant 1 now, so let's just change it over to button. And then what I want to show you is Framer makes it very easy for you to add these hover state or press states to buttons. In Figma, it looks a little bit different, but it is super convenient in Framer to create these button styles. So if I were to click on to hover, I want to get rid of the drop shadow. As I press on it, the drop shadow should disappear. So I'm going to perhaps reduce the drop shadow a little bit. So it is like this. And if I were to play this now, look, in preview, it's super easy peasy. And then what I want to do next is, since I've created this inter component, I also want to create like a variable for the CTA text here. So that's also super easy to do. All you need to do is, with the first variant selected, select this, click into the button text, the text layer, and then go over here and click onto this purple plus and say something like create variable plain text and say button text. And by default, it will say button text placeholder button text. So that's also super easy. What I want to do now is create a white variant, because we do get to use this in our design. I believe we do use it in, there you go. That gets used in our home section, homepage, sorry. And then all we need to do is plus, click on plus. It'll be like variant 2 is going to be white button. And then I'm just going to change the color over here. Oh, we don't have white. That's so funny. So yeah, all you need to do is change the color for the hover press state. Let's do the same thing where the drop shadow is smaller, and that should work out really nicely. For the sake of time, I'm probably going to skip over creating the mobile versions. But as you can tell, it is super easy to create these buttons. So if I were to actually go over to the homepage Raymond worked on previously, I can go over to my assets. So all the way on the left, you do have these assets. I can drag this into my page, and then I can say, oh, sorry, apologize for that. And I can easily update the text to say, read more, see my projects. What I can also do is basically change this orange variant into the white button or the white variant super easily. So I hope that makes some sense. What I want to do now is to walk you through. Oh, sorry, Joshua.
Hey, Irem. I think the students in the chat have just mentioned if you could just slow down a little bit. They've been trying to keep up, so like just give them a second to catch up. That's all.
Sure. Okay, all good. We'll try to do that. Yeah, I apologize. We have a lot packed into this workshop, so I want to make
No
sure that,
issues.
yeah.
They're just
Okay,
catching
cool.
up.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's actually get started with importing our design into Framer now. You'll be like, why did we do all of this? Okay, well, you have all these text styles, you have the button styles, what's the purpose of that? You'll get to see that in a bit. Like I said, if I were to just import this design into Framer, it just doesn't detect that this is heading 1, this is body large or body medium. So we need to manually assign these styles to these texts in Framer directly. So this is actually the fun part, probably the easiest part of our workshop today. One thing I'd like to mention is if you're creating custom designs like these in Figma, you want to make sure that everything is named properly so that it's not like frame 2005, I don't know, button, some janky name. You want to make sure that everything is named properly. If you were to take a look at our design, we do have auto layout applied to certain sections that call for auto layout. This is actually pretty important. So before we actually move this design into Figma, one thing I'd like to call out is I'm gonna first show you how to do it properly when we have a design like this. And then I'm also going to show you a way for how not to do it. So if you were to take a look at our design, it's for the most part straightforward. But if you look at this section on the right, we do have these little sparkles around this little illustration. The best practice would be to put all of these into a little frame that holds the illustration as well as the sparkles. The bad practice would be to basically just put these randomly into the design. These are not in a group or a frame. So first, let's just get started with actually using this design where we're using the best practices. So I want to make sure that this is selected. So this first frame that we call hero section, I'm going to go over to plugins. I'm going to select Figma to HTML with Framer again. Oh, sorry. There we go. Let's do that again. You want to make sure to copy this to clipboard. And then what I want to do is in my design, okay, this is where we have the home page. I'd like to create a frame for it first, a frame that will hold this little section. Sometimes what happens with Framer is it doesn't necessarily copy things properly. So you think you did everything right, but you look at the layers section, it just is like a gray rectangle, it's not showing anything properly. So I created this frame. I'm going to change the name to say hero section. And then what I do now is you can do Command V or just right click and then paste this. There you go. So for the most part, this has been copied over really nicely. There are a couple issues where things are not necessarily center aligned, but we can easily fix that. You can maybe make this image, a little bit taller. Maybe you want to make sure that this frame is a little smaller, etc., so that things look a little bit more flush and there's consistent padding on the right and the left. One thing you're going to notice is these graphics, they've not been copied over really nicely. We're going to get to that later, but for now, what I want to show you is also perhaps using the design with the poor practices. As I mentioned, we do have our illustration, we do have our sparkles here. They need to be in a frame, but if you were to take a look at this design now, things are just like floating around, they're not in a group. What I want to do is now go over to Framer again, create another frame. I'm going to call this hero section do not do, or don't do. So let's do this. I'm going to do the exact same thing, but now I'm copying this design with the poor practices. I select this, go over to plugins, Figma to HTML with Framer, copy to clipboard, and then you'll see what happens next. See, everything is now looking a little bit janky, where these shapes are just floating around. You don't even know where the second sparkle is. This is just looking super janky. So the best practice is always to put these shapes into one frame or a group before you copy over the design into Framer. So let's just get rid of this actually. I would not recommend, again, doing this. So let's just go over to our second section. This is our hobbies section. So for a section like this, where we're using improper grids, where things are a little bit laid out in a different fashion, you don't necessarily need to use auto layout. You can just like put all of these into a frame. You'll just save time, honestly. So I'm going to go into Framer first. I'm going to create a frame for this section. I'm going to call it the hobbies section. Want to make sure that this has the exact same width as my Figma design. I'm going to go over. I'm going to copy this over again, go over to plugins, select Figma to Framer plugin, copy the clipboard, and then paste this over. As you see, it pasted over really nicely, which is nice. Excuse me. But if you were to take a look, this hobbies section is like super tall, which is not great. What we want to do is, ideally the height of this hobbies section is determined by the height of the section we just copied it over from Figma. So what I want to do is go over to hobbies section, go over to this panel on the right, and change the height from fixed to fit content. And now it looks a little bit nicely. Anyway, so let's move on to this section. This is for our projects. So one thing that I want to call out right away is this section is a little bit more complicated. Let's just say you have a design like this, we're using like custom design, etc. You want to make sure that sections that call out for auto layout, they should be in auto layout. Like if you were to take a look at this little project description is in an auto layout. This frame that holds the project description, tags, and the button, they're all in an auto layout. I wouldn't necessarily worry too much about, like having these little shapes in an auto layout. You don't necessarily need to worry about that. So what you want to do is go back to Framer again. I'm going to create another frame. This time we're going to call it the project section. Okay. This section is going to be a little bit long, so I want to make sure that the page is going to be actually going to handle it properly. So let's just like give it more height. And what I'm going to do is now I'm going to go back once again, select the project section in Figma directly, and then run the Figma to Framer plugin. Copy the clipboard, and then paste this over. paste. So for the most part, everything is copied over really nicely, except these little things. So these little notches, which is perfectly fine. What we could do is bring them to the top of this radio thing. So let's do that very quickly. And that's one of the things I really like about Framer, because you get to literally see all of the layers on the left easily. Sometimes with other tools like Webflow, Squarespace, you're like, okay, where is this little thing? Like, where do I find it and move it around? That's one of the things I don't necessarily like. We are running into the same issue again. Now this project section is looking super tall. What I do now is go to our panel again on the right, and then change the height from fixed to fit content. And as you see now, things are looking a little bit better. So footer section is going to be actually fairly straightforward. Everything is in an auto layout. So yeah, you know, our footer is also in an auto layout. We do have our little illustration here. What I'm gonna do is probably go through this quickly. I'm gonna select footer. Wait, before I do that, yes, it's always a great idea to create your layout first. Frame that will hold the footer section. I'll call this footer section, footer home or something. Okay, let's do this. Go back to Figma again. Make sure that this is selected and run the plugin again. Copy to clipboard. And then I'm just gonna paste this over. Same thing is happening. You want to make sure that the height is set to fit content. We could also do the same thing for the page that holds all of these different sections. So right now the height is set to fixed. Let's just make it so that it does fit the content. And voila, you have all of these different sections for the home page copied over really nicely. One thing that you're gonna notice is Framer does this weird thing where there are all like some of the things are applied automatically by default, which is not great. So if you take a look very carefully, you get to see like this weird space. Like, what is this gap? What you want to do is with the desktop view selected, go over to the right panel again, and then get rid of this gap. See, now that gap has disappeared. So we're not going to work on the mobile version of the homepage because, like I said, this has some complex elements. And yeah, for the sake of time, what we wanted to show you was you can create your own custom designs in Figma and transfer them over to Framer easily. Let's just come back to this. As you noticed, if you were to click on the text style here, there's nothing assigned properly. Why is that happening? As I said previously, Framer doesn't necessarily detect that this is a heading 1. Okay, this is assigned as heading 1 in Figma, but Framer does not detect that. In order to make this into heading 1, we do need to manually select from the list of styles. We also need to create in Framer. So now this is set to heading 1. This should be our large body copy. So I'm going to also assign that manually. So with the text style selected, you want to go over to styles and then assign body large to this. And it should be perfectly fine for now. The other thing is these graphics, they didn't copy over nicely. One thing I would recommend is, this is actually very easy to do. When it comes to little shapes like these, you want to perhaps just work like this, where you can copy this shape, get rid of the drop shadow, copy this as an SVG, copy it into perhaps, you know, this section where we have our style guide, and add the drop shadow manually. So I know it's a little bit of duplicate work, but at the end of the day, what's the word? Framer doesn't necessarily copy these shapes really nicely. And I could say, I could turn this into a component and I could say, this is my pin. I'm going to go back to my design where these are looking super janky. And then I could actually drag this into my design. See, this is already looking a little bit better. This one does not look better. Okay, let's see. Why is this looking janky now? Maybe this. Yeah, that's weird. It should not look janky, guys. Okay, that's weird. I don't think we necessarily have time to revisit what's happening or like resolve this issue. So I think I can take a look at this later. I don't necessarily know what happened, but you know, as we mentioned at the beginning, you know, we're doing this all live. Imagine like you have a professor, they want you to build a website in front of like the entire class of 200 people. You know, it's that kind of feeling a little bit, but yeah. So, okay, there you go, Raymond. The magician has helped me. There you go, he fixed it. Oh, wait, is it the same issue? That's so funny. Oops, where did that go? Maybe you. Okay. Raymond has fixed it for me. Thank you so much. And this is why you need to stay on for the next 50 minutes or so to tune into Raymond's portion where he's going to build the about page from scratch. So closing notes. When you are actually using the Figma to Framer plugin and you want to transfer these custom designs into Framer easily, ideally, most, but not all the frames have auto layout applied. It's just going to make it super easy for Framer to turn those into stacks. Because technically, auto layout in Figma is practically the same thing as stacks in Framer. I would recommend creating a quick style guide for text, color, and other elements. Because like I said, Framer doesn't detect the styles in your design by default. You do need to assign those styles manually. And when it comes to illustrations, icons, ideally they should be copied over as SVGs. And I guess I can pass it back to Raymond.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Irem. Yeah, we'll go back to our designs over here. And we'll take a look at how we'll be building the about page from scratch. So that'll be this little guy over here, as well as the mobile version of it. In any case, we'll be walking you through how to build like the navigation, for example. So let's get started. So first off, this was what we were working with when Irem was working with the homepage. All you really need to do to add more pages in Framer is easily just clicking on the plus and to the new page. In this case, we call it about. Since we are also building this for mobile responsive, you want to make sure that everything is nicely set. So as you recall, our desktop width was set to 1440 pixels. So if you want to go back to your about page over here, we just make sure the width is set to 1440. And then you want to click on the plus, and then you want to add a phone. So on the phone here, it's set to 320, just so that we're accommodating for smaller screen sizes as we go about it. Now, to make this a bit easier for me, I'll just be copying these kind of designs over just so that I have a reference point, so I'm not like jumping back and forth between the Figma file, which could be a bit distracting. So I'll paste them over here. I don't know why they showed up that way, but yeah, there we go. So let's get started with the desktop. the first thing we want to take a look at is the navigation bar over here. And as you can see, if you look into it, we have the name of the person, Dana Parker. We have projects, the about, as well as the contact. And it's just kind of nicely fit into this kind of neat little navigation bar. So since Framer itself uses the canvas as however you wish, you can just quickly start by pressing T on your keyboard, and let's say going with Dana Parker. By default, this comes in to a different text style, but as we recall, we're working with like the mobile ones. So if you go to your right on the styles, it should be one of these mobile headings. So you just want to make sure that it matches, or rather it's for the desktop. So that looks about right. And then you want to go in here and you want to do projects, make a copy over here, about, and contact. And how I'm making these copies is I'm holding Alt on my keyboard. So you can just hold Alt and drag something to make a copy of it. Perfect. Yeah, so let's get started with this. So first you'll realize that this is all being held by a frame called a nav item with a gap of 40. And by default, it is a bit smaller. If you go into it, you see that the sizing is 24 pixels. So you want to go in here and either find one of these textiles that have 24 pixels. It seems like body is, but it's a different kind of like style. So we can either break it and set it to 24, or we can select the mobile one as well. But let's just do this for simplicity. And now you want to kind of highlight them all, right click, and add to a stack. You can also use Control or Command Alt Enter to add it all to a stack. Once you add it to a stack, it's going to look like this. It's not going to look the best, but that's all fine, because stacks on default kind of are center aligned. And how you want to kind of make it look like this is you first want to remove the fill on the background. So you go to styles and you want to take that out. So once you take that out, it's all in the middle, but we don't want that. We want stuff to align from the left to the right. And so on distribution, we want it to start, because this is the start of our stack. And then the gap in between all these elements is 40. You'll realize that the hugging kind of container is a bit wide. It's because the width is set to a fixed width of this. We want it to hug the content. So you want to click on fixed, and then you want to fit the content over here, and you have a really nice one over there. Now, if you want to go in here, you'll realize kind of the spacing in between is set to, that actually doesn't tell me, but we'll figure that out together. No worries. And we have these elements as well. So we can kind of like do a little hacky thing. We'll go back to home and pull in these elements. We will copy it, go back to our about page, and kind of just place them here for safekeeping, just to be on the side. So as you can tell, within our designs, we have Dana Parker here all in one container. So you want to do this, you want to hold shift, or you want to also like kind of highlight everything together, and you want to make them a stack once again. So same thing, Control Alt Enter. We'll put them all in center aligned. That's not what we want. We want to distribute it from the start on the left to right, but now we have a different way of distributing this. One of these ways is if you click on the distribution, there's one called space between. So very similar to Figma, if you're coming from Figma, is the same as using auto spacing in between elements. And so what it does, it will detect the entire container and find a space between that works best for both of them, and work with that over there. So yeah, now we are getting close to something that looks like our navigation bar. As always, you want to take out the fill because it's not looking too great. And once again, we'll be wrapping it between these two little graphical elements. So you want to highlight everything, right click, and add a stack to them. Then removing that fill, and then figuring out what the spacing is in between them. So if we kind of reference our design files over here, you'll realize that the gap here is 24 pixels, and it kind of has some left and right spacing of 24, as well as a height of 16. So if we go back to our file, you want to set the gap here of 24, and then you want everything again to hug the content. Nice. And then now that we have this with us, we can now kind of build the padding around it. So if you go click on this, which is the padding around, it goes TRBL. So that's top right, bottom left. I wish Framer had a similar kind of padding system as Figma does, but it's okay. We'll just use this for now. So the top was 16, our right was 24, our bottom was 16, and our left was also 24. And then finally, you can add a fill. So if you want to go in here and add a color, it will be this blue. And yeah, so it's looking like it's getting there for sure. You want to add kind of like a radius to it. If you go back to the designs, it's 112, as well as kind of like the coloring. So and then so you can tell that it's like kind of getting coming together. And then you want a border here. Let's say we want it to be like the black that we are working with. And then you want to set it to like the 4 pixels. Let me see why the padding is not going through. Let me remove the stack here for now. And let's try to oh, there we go. Not sure why that didn't work the first time. Bottom and 24. I see. Yeah, the reason was the width itself was basically not fitting the content. So you essentially just have to keep fitting the content and it'll kind of like work that way. I don't know why by default it doesn't set it to fit, but that's all right. We can definitely go back in and change its color, change its radius, 112, and then add the border that we are working with. So that's main black. And as you can see, there's also a shadow within it. The current shadow we're working with right now will be under shadows. So you want to, let's say, do an X of 4 and a Y of 6. The color is set to 100 charcoal high. And then we don't have any blurs. Perfect. So now it's looking quite similar to what we already have. If we reference the designs over here, the width is set to 1280. So if you go here, you can change the width now to a fixed length of 1280. So that's all spread. As you can see, the distribution is not great. However, all I really need to do is go into your kind of stack that holds all the text layers and make the width kind of fill the space in between. And there we go. That is our navigation item. As for best practices, you can definitely go in here, rename it, call it nav, and that's what we are working with. Now to get started, I think Irem showed you guys how to make the buttons earlier, but this is also a quick run through on how to use components. And so what you want to do is you want to right click on the nav and click create component, and let's call it nav for now. And once you create a component, you can use this wherever you wish. By default, this is set to a desktop, so you want to rename this component here to a desktop, and now you want to build something that is responsive for mobile. So let's say you want to go to the designs and you want to take a look at what the mobile one should look like. So by default, it should look like this little guy over here. Let me just try to pull it up. So on average, it kind of has a width of 320 and a height of 78. The only thing we really need to work with is this little icon over here and the words Dana Parker. So that's perfect because that's exactly what we want to work with. So what I want to do first is extract my little icon over here. Let's call it menu, or a hamburger rather. And I want to pull it into my component itself. So I can do Control Command X to cut it. Go into my assets. I now have my nav over there. I can double click into it. And now I am back to this view. I can click into my desktop and I click on the right side, which is the variant. And it essentially makes a one-to-one copy of this. But now we want this to be mobile. So first off, let's not forget about the hamburger we just copied. I'll do Control or Command V to bring this back, and we'll just let that guy chill there for a bit. And let's name this mobile. Now, the hardest thing I'd say to kind of bridge between mobile and desktop is being able to build these variants within, because any changes you make to the parent does kind of influence the other ones, but anything you make change here does not influence the parent, which is great. So as a reference, I'm going to go back to my style guide page, and that's where I have the little menu. I'm going to just kind of go in here and take a quick look, or rather a screenshot of what this is meant to look like, and then go back to my assets and just paste it, just so that I have this for reference, so I don't have to go back and forth. So first off, let's get rid of this, and let's get rid of these little buttons because they're not present on the mobile. And then next, we realize that there's a bit more padding on the left and right. So it is by default 24, which is great, but as you can tell, there is a larger padding on top and bottom. So we'll change that to 24 and 24. And then what's also different is that it doesn't have a radius. So we can bring that back to 0. We'll take away the border, take away the shadow beneath it. And yeah, essentially we're more or less done with the mobile. All you really need to do is get the hamburger, plop it back in, and there you are. That is your mobile. Make sure your width and height are set to the right content. So if you put it to fixed, the height was 78 and the width was 320 because our mobile view was 320. The text here is looking a little big, so you can go back here and change the text style to, let's say, mobile heading 2 or heading 3 rather, to just make it easier for yourself in the future. And there you are. You have a navigation ready for both desktop and mobile. And I'll show you why that's really powerful in just a sec. So if you go back to your pages and back to the about page that we are building, you'll realize that now we have this navigation item that we can easily plop onto our thing, but at the same time put as well on our hero section. So by default, our hero section has a kind of universal padding of like 24 on the left and right. So as per Irem, the best practices is to drop a frame first. So you can press F to drop this frame, and sometimes the kind of viewport itself will kind of snap immediately to it, but don't worry. All I really need to do is change the height to something that's like fixed for now, and you can kind of drag this down so that you're working with a lot more space. And then what you want to do is you can take out the layout for now so that you can move this anywhere you want. And yeah, essentially play around with this. So it's blue for some reason. We don't need to do that. We can just make this a clear frame and call it hero section. And now by default, this hero section doesn't really have too much logic with it because it's just a clear frame, but that's totally okay. What we can do is first drop in our navigation in the middle and set it over there. You don't have to worry too much about layout just yet. And then let's continue by building out these items itself. So let's do a text layer that says, are you enjoying the stay so far? And then let's just copy over this text over here. And finally, we have the buttons over here that says read my story, which is one of the buttons that Irem built. So you can go here. That you can just change this to, oops, sorry. Go back to the about page, change the button text to read my story. Perfect. Now you can kind of eyeball kind of like your designs for a bit and see what heading it is. So over here, it's set to head 1, I believe. And don't worry too much if you can't kind of shrink your text, because you can definitely change the way it grows. So in this scenario now, you can kind of shrink that. Similarly to this as well. Learn more about who I am as a designer. You can definitely change that to one of the body texts, which has to be body large. Perfect. So we're already getting there. And then we have the button right beneath it. And then we have this little graphic, which we can pull from our assets. So in part of the style guide, I believe it's kind of underneath here. Yeah, you can just go in here. We'll just Control Command C, and then go back to the about page and just paste it. Great. So we're all getting there. Essentially, this is, as you can see, in one stack first, and then we have something that goes beneath it. Between them, there is a spacing of 24 pixels, and then finally a 48 pixels. So how we can think of it is in terms of 2 stacks. So it will be the title text and the body. You will right click and add to a stack. As always, just left align it from the start, and then have the height kind of like fit the content itself. And then you can take out the background. And then for the gap itself here, let's change this to 24. And then call this title. And then you want to add the button and add the title again. Same thing, you add it to a stack, left align it, start just read from the start. And then you want to do 48. And the height will fit the content itself, and we take away that background. As you can see over here, it does cut the shadow a little bit, but don't worry. You can always adjust overflow behaviors on the right. As you can see, it's hidden. So that means anything that the frame itself is capturing, or rather it doesn't capture, does not show, but you can click that to visible. And there you go. Our lovely shadow is back. And yeah, finally, you can join these two and kind of add them to a stack itself. So it's already looking quite close to what we have, which is great. We can take that out, and we can finally change the overflow behavior once again, because it's holding that. And then the spacing itself is also center distributed, but I personally like to do space between here so that it's like nicely spaced in between each other. If you want to be really close to your designs, you can definitely kind of go and reference it. So if you go back to our Figma file, there's a gap over here just set to auto, which is totally cool. Our hero section on average, it's the left and right padding of 80, and then we have a top padding of 64 and a bottom padding of 128. So let's get that fit in. We'll put that into our hero section itself. We'll go into this, and now we want to click on layout. So on average, it already looks quite close, but once you click on layout, you've added some logic onto the elements over here. So let's work with the padding first. So the first thing is our left and right padding. So that is right and L is going to be 80. Our bottom padding was 128. And our top padding was 64. And now you can see the elements are quite close. But if you look into the design itself, the gap here as well was 112. So you can go back here and change your gap to 112. And there you go. That's your hero section. The height itself for some reason stays fixed, but you can definitely fit all the content. So now it looks nice and neat. Now for the mobile section of things, you realize that things just seem like it's been popped over, and that's not great. So what I want to do is, remember when we built the navigation on the mobile side of things, you can go into it, and now you can change the variant here to mobile. So it's still not looking great, but that's totally okay because you can kind of see the adjustments of everything. You can definitely pull in the menu itself inside just so that you have a lot more space to work with. And then finally, what you want to do is, since it's mobile, the padding itself is very different, and we want it to look like, let me see, we want it to look like this. So what we can do is, first off, let's take out the top padding, which is 64. Now that's 0. As you can tell, it doesn't really look great because it's not growing the right way. So for the width, let's set it to fill. Oh, let me see where this is. The hero section. It is fixed. Okay, that's fine. Go set it to 320 just to keep things simple. And then within the section here itself, as you can tell, it's also a little bit different. There's a gap of 32 between the elements, so you can change that to 32. And then finally, the most important one is the content. So going from desktop to mobile, you can see that our content here is horizontally distributed, but now we want it to be vertical. So let's do that first. You want to click into your stack here. In this case, it's the stack that holds this content, and you want to set the direction to top and bottom. So it's okay, it's already getting there so far. That's totally fine, but it's still not looking like what we want to. And as you can see, any kind of decisions you make on mobile does not affect the desktop. So that's the best part about working with Framer. So now you want to take your graphic down here. I normally like to use arrow keys for this. You just press up and you plop it up. It is a bit smaller on our mobile side, so you want to make this a bit tinier. And let's say for this, for example, it's a bit wide. You definitely don't want this to be too wide. So first off, you want to kind of set its constraints. So the width itself now is going to be a little bit smaller. That kind of like fits within the content itself. So let's first tone down the text styling. You want to go in here, change it to mobile, maybe like mobile 1. You're enjoying your stay so far, perfect. And then content itself is really wide. You definitely want to make it fill over here. So it is getting there. You want to just essentially go in, keep changing your stuff to fill. And you are essentially getting closer. As you can see, the left and right padding is still 80, and we don't want that. So we have 24 global padding, so we can set this to 24. And we're getting closer and closer to what we already have with our desktop, which is great. Let's essentially kind of like change this text styling. So let's say like a mobile body large, for example. As you can see, it also gets cut off, but don't worry. Anything that gets cut off essentially is kind of set to a fixed width, and you can definitely let it fill in the container and yeah, essentially work with it that way. Other than that, maybe this padding needs to be adjusted, like it's 24 over here. This button could be a bit smaller. And we can kind of like go in and make mobile versions of that. So let's say for this, I want to make a variant that's like a little bit tinier. So I can go in and kind of reference my own designs. So let me see where I can find this. So as you can see over here, it is set to 14 and the padding itself is like 12, 24, 12, 24. So if we go back to our button, our third variant, let's call this mobile. Our text inside, set it to 14. And then the padding itself, it's 12, 24, 12, 24. The line height is, there we go, perfect. Yeah, and then we can definitely turn down the shadow a little bit to make it 2, make it 3 over here. And now it's looking great. We can go back to our pages, to our about page, and we can easily click on our button and change it to mobile. Cool. So that is our hero section over here. As you're sure, you can definitely check to see if everything fits correctly, but if you're quite satisfied with your progress, you can definitely go with that forward. Yeah, next we can move on to building out the rest of this. So I'd say, I'm looking at the time and I feel like we have a decent amount of time to at least get through like this section and this section. Maybe not everything, but I'll do my best to kind of walk you guys through that. So the best part about this is that, you know, you can use the design space over here as your canvas. Just to save time, I have kind of built this card prior just to speed things up a little bit. So for a style guide, let's say, for example, I just built these 2 cards on the side just so that we can kind of work with that for this workshop. But I do encourage you guys to kind of go in and try to build these cards out yourself, just so that you guys know the ins and outs of Framer. But just for speed, we'll kind of take a look over here. So once you paste this, that'll be the mobile version, and this is the desktop version. It's a bit janky because the textiles didn't fully capture, but then you can always go in and just change the textiles over here. So I'm just kind of eyeballing it, but that seems about accurate. And this essentially is kind of like the same. So for this section, it's quite simple. It's 2 cards, so we'll make a copy over here. One is yellow, one is green, and it just says how do we get into design, which is captured by the container. So best practices, once again, you want to make your frame, which comes in blue for some reason, but that's fine. You can take it out, rename it, and let's call it how it did. I get into design and essentially position it flush with this section over here, but that's okay because we'll be putting a layout over everything later, so don't worry about that. And the only thing here that you have for this section is the two cards and the text. So very similarly, you can just press T. I get into design, and you can change the styling to heading 1. I believe that's what it was. Yes, perfect. Since this is green, you can go in and change this to one of the oranges that we have. I believe is this one. Perfect. And yeah, it's just got top and bottom padding of 96 and a gap of 96. And yeah, we just have global padding left and right of 80, so we'll stick with that. So as always, just pop it in. As you can see, everything's kind of like nice and neatly moved together. You can definitely go in here as well. And I'll do this for the desktop, and if we have time for the mobile, we'll get to that. So first, let's just get the card itself and move out. And it does come in a stack at first. So you want to highlight the both of them, right click, and add it to a stack. And then you want to take out the background itself. By default, it's kind of like being kind of spaced out. So you want the width and height to kind of like fit the content, as always. And then let's say, for example, we put a spacing of 24. We're going to adjust that later. You'll put that in your file. This, how to get into design, is you can add a layout to it. It's got left and right padding of 80. And then the top and bottom of 96. Yeah, it's looking already quite good. And then the gap in between here, as we know, is also 96. Perfect. So yeah, we essentially got this. If you want to kind of play around with the spacing a little more, you can set the initial stack container, or we can call this like cards container, and set the width to kind of like fill whatever's in here. And then if you set the distribution to space between, it'll take up all the space in between. Perfect. So something a bit more complex is this I like to approach design section. So we can definitely get that ready. As always, I'll be pulling a longer version of this. And yeah, we'll press F, make a frame here. Let's actually use the same color of purple that we used. So if you go here, it will be the purple. And let's call this design approach. Perfect. So let's go ahead and make these cards. So as you can see with these cards itself, it's quite simple. It's just an icon, a title, a body text, and just some padding around it, as well as the colors. So let's get started with that. First, I'll kind of go back to my style guide because that's where we dropped some assets for the icons. So it'll be these 4. I'll kind of copy that, go back to my about page and paste them. And then the first one is intentionality and inclusivity. Honestly, I can just kind of pull the information down here so that we make things a lot faster. As long as you're keeping the styles consistent, it should be fine. Transparency. Oops. Let me just pull that here. And pull this down here. And let's just do that for the first 2 as well. Perfect. So yeah, let's go in each of them. And if we reference our designs, we can see that they're essentially within an auto layout frame. They have universal padding, or rather they have left, top, and right as 48 and bottom as 64. And that's pretty much it. And then within the element itself, you have just a little bit of like, we can make this look nicer. So if you go in here, you'll realize that it's not a stack because as you can see, this icon is just a square. So you want to add some layout to it just to add some logic, and it looks nice and neat. And then you want to maybe add a little gap of, let's say, 24, just to make things crisp. And yeah, we'll do that for all of these. So we'll add layout, left aligned from the top, gap of 24. And then this should just fit the content. Oh, whoops. So this one seems like it's already in a auto layout, which is kind of odd, but that's fine. We can just take this out and then go in here. It's 24. Perfect. Yeah, now we can go in here and add it to like a card. So what you can do is you will add it to a stack, and within the stack you have a bit more padding that you can play with around. So referencing these numbers again, it's 48 on all sides and then 64 on the bottom. So if you go in here, it will be 48, 48, and then 64, and then 48. By default, it does set it to fixed, which is kind of odd, but you can definitely fit the content and fit the content once again. It is a bit curved in the radius, so let's say I want to set that to like 8. I have a border once again of like the main black. That's like 4 pixels tall. And then I have my shadow, which is 2 and 6 with no blur. And there you are. And yeah, you'll do this exact same thing with kind of like the rest of these. Or maybe even like to make it faster, I can make a copy of this, kind of pull the content out from within here, and then just like plop the content in there, you know? Like, yeah. Why work too hard when you can work a bit smarter? Perfect. As you can see, it does kind of hold the content a bit. So anything that's a bit wider or taller, it does change the shape a little bit, and we don't want that. We want stuff to kind of look very consistent. So what we can do is reference our designs, and as you can see, our card itself is 608 pixels wide and 441 in height. Let's keep this simple. Let's maybe do like 600 and 440. So if you go back to our designs, you can highlight all of these, and let's say our width and height are fixed, so that is 600 and 440. Perfect. So we are getting there with our stack. Everything is looking pretty good for the most part. And yeah, this is a great opportunity for me to show you guys the power of stacks, because what you can do now is you can highlight all of them, and once you can add a stack to all of these, so that will be going into the layouts panel on the right, you can right click and add them all to a stack. So it doesn't look great, as you can probably tell from the beginning, because it is all kind of left to right aligned, and that's not great. But now you can use the power of a grid, which is here. It's essentially a stack, but you can control how many columns or rows you have. So in this scenario, we have 2 rows and 2 columns, so that's perfect. That's what we want. And the gap between all of them is 64. So just like magic, it just kind of pops off like that. And you want to go 64 between all of them. And then you want the grid to essentially hug your content a little bit. Not sure why it does that, but yeah, let's just stick with this for now. Perfect. Yeah, same thing as we did to the top. That's fine. Just make a copy of it and just say down here, I like to approach design with, and then I believe it's a smaller heading, so you can take that there, plop it into the purple, plop this into the purple, make the purple a bit taller just so that you know what you're working with. Move the purple around to make sure that all the content's in it. As you can tell, the stack is not within the content, so now you kind of have to go back in here, find the original grid, call it something like hard grid, and then kind of plop it back into the purple. And now it's part of the design approach. Just as we did before, we have top and bottom padding 128 now, and then left and right of 80. So click into your initial frame, which has no logic yet, click into layout, and then padding for top and bottom, it's 128, and then left and right, it will be 80. 128, and then 80. Perfect. And there you have your I like to approach design section with, aside from the little gap in here, which is 128. Make sure not to forget about that. And boom, there we go. Yeah, I'm not too sure if we have time for one more section. Do we, Irem?
I
we have
mean,
10 minutes left and a few questions also which have come in.
Yeah, like should we focus more on like the questions now, or
I'll let Irem decide.
sure, I think we can ask people in the chat. So do you guys want us to focus on finishing the rest of the design? We do have another section if you were to take a look, some cool design friends, or should we answer some other questions? You can just put it in the chat. If you want us to keep building it, sure.
deploy to an actual site. So the best part about Framer here, one, is you can publish it whenever you want. It does publish instantly to a kind of Framer domain. So let's say we click on this, it gets published, and that will be your Framer domain, which is, you know, spicy object, whatever. You can add a custom domain. Obviously, you do have to pay for that. And just like that, you can literally click into this and our website is ready to go. It definitely looks a bit janky to begin with, so you do have to play around with how you want the responsiveness to work. But let's say, for example, you're working with a screen that's not super wide like mine. This looks great on like 1440p screens. But if you want to build for like larger screen types, definitely do consider kind of like adjusting your design as well. But for responsiveness, like you can definitely go in here and set the width instead of fixed to like fill or like fit content as well. So definitely play around with those options.
Cool. Looks like people want us to answer questions. So I guess in the remaining 7 minutes, we could take some questions. we're not going to be able to get to all of these questions. Some of them are going to be a little bit more complex to answer over this workshop. But yeah, we'll probably do our best. So I'm looking at the questions now. Amy, I apologize. Is it Amy Zong? I apologize for butchering your last name, but you are asking if our portfolios are done using Framer and Figma. I'll answer for myself at the moment. No, I'm a freelancer, so I've been super busy with projects and such. So I've not had a chance to like create everything in Framer yet. But yeah, this year I'm looking to build my own portfolio using Framer. I used to use Webflow, but yeah, it's just I'm paying way too much for it, and I'm not able to go live as quickly as I want. As you see, Framer is like super powerful, super easy to create these custom designs in. So yeah, and I guess Raymond, you do have your portfolio on Webflow. Do you want to
Yes,
speak to that?
for sure. Yeah, like I've been remaking my portfolio this year in general. It was initially on Webflow, but like Irem here mentioned, Framer is a lot faster, especially coming from the Figma subspace. Like I use Figma every day for my day job, and so it just makes sense. As Irem showed you guys in her portion of this workshop, it's a lot faster to just use the plugin and get your styles in, and yeah, make your design very snappy as well. So yeah, that's what I'll say about that.
Sure. So let's see. There are other questions here too. Oh, there we go. This is actually a really good question. If you can design everything on Framer, what is the purpose and benefits by doing on Figma and transfer to Framer? Should it be better to do everything on Framer? Absolutely, you can go ahead and make use of Framer. You don't necessarily need to rely on Figma and then use the plugin. I think what we wanted to show today was most people are very proficient in Figma. As Raymond said, he uses it every day at his workplace. I do too. And I'm assuming a lot of, new designers or even experienced designers, they use Figma like pretty frequently. So we wanted to show how we can easily import maybe existing designs, maybe you created for your portfolio into Framer easily. But absolutely, it's up to you if you want to create everything in Framer first and just skip Figma altogether. I think this answers the other question. Do you encourage the workflow of doing designs in Figma first? Not necessarily. It's all up to you. We just wanted to show different, workflows. One is Figma to Framer. You have something in Figma transferred over to Framer easily, and you can also build a page from scratch like Raymond did. So let's see. This is a good question and probably applies to a lot of people who are looking to switch their portfolios over to Framer. Which Framer plan do you recommend us to pay for? Is the free version good enough to create a decent portfolio? For the most part, I would say yes. I think if you're looking to use your own custom domain, you can probably pay for the basic plan, which is like a couple of bucks per month, which is way cheaper than a lot of the other tools out there. So yeah, you can use the free version, but I guess it's not going to necessarily have like your own custom domain, something.com. But if you want to just go with the free plan, sure, you can do that. Let's see. Raymond, maybe you can speak to this. Does the Figma to Framer plugin work well with components from Figma. So let's just say you're transferring components from Figma to Framer.
Yeah.
There are a couple of questions around this. Maybe you take this.
Yeah, so I mean, from my experience, I'm not too sure if it does. We can actually try it, but to be honest, I don't think it copies like components one-to-one, but let's just try it. So let's say we have this button. We turn this into a component right away. Let's say this is our component over here. We'll kind of run the Figma to Framer plugin. We'll copy it, and then let's go to our design file, paste it. Yeah, as you can see, it only pastes itself as a, like a regular auto layout frame, which isn't like the worst thing. Honestly, it would make things a lot faster if you just paste it and then right click and then turn this into a component. It's a bit of an extra step, but it's not like the worst thing. So if you do build components faster in Figma anyway, I might as well start there. But since you are making a website, I would recommend putting all the components that you are using, like buttons or navigations, in Framer itself.
I think it's 2 o'clock. Zosh, should we perhaps wrap it up? Or I don't know. I think we answered most of the questions.
Yeah, we can wrap it up. What I would recommend to everybody is to watch the recording after today's session if you missed on some parts. Learning a new software is never easy, and it's always going to happen that you may miss on some steps, and it's completely natural. I would also say that when you watch the recording again, it's going to be a good way for you to just remind yourself of the things you've learned, because it's just a good recap, a good revision. So highly encourage everybody to watch the recording for good, to just see the things you missed, and also to revise the topics that were covered. Also, I want each one of us to give a huge round of applause and just thank Irem and Raymond for putting all the effort they put in for today's workshop. It's clear, as you all can see, that they've spent a lot of time preparing for today's workshop. So just again want to thank them. Really appreciate the both of them coming in out here today. And if you all want to connect with them, you can reach out to each one of them on LinkedIn, and definitely follow Irem's page on early stage design jobs. If you're just getting started out in your career, you can definitely check out the jobs that she's always posting for early designers. Awesome.
Perfect. Yeah, well, thank you guys so much. As always, it's been a pleasure working with Zosh and the team here. This recording will be posted online on the Dubstack or I guess you have Washington YouTube channel. And yeah, hopefully, you can definitely follow us. We'll be posting more and more Framer content as time comes. We started off with our interface kind of intro, but we'll definitely have more stuff in the future. So yeah, definitely reach out, say hi, and hopefully you'll learn something fun from this.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, I appreciate you all for coming in. I know it's a Saturday, it's like the weekend. You guys get to chill, grab some matcha, dim sum, bubble tea, but you guys instead wanted to be here, like learning with us. And I'm seeing some familiar faces in the crowd: Andrew, Bronson, Sharon, Kevin, and all of you new friends. Oh, really? Thank you so much. This is better than bubble tea. I would agree. I'm not a bubble tea person. So, but anyways, yeah, make sure to perhaps subscribe to our YouTube channel. I think you guys are already connected with both of us on LinkedIn too. We're hoping to have more content like this so that we can help you perhaps navigate the complexity of, building your portfolio site easily. Yeah, I guess we can end it here.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining, everyone. We're now going to be taking a small break. It's going to be a 1-hour break. Join us again at 3 p.m. for a talk by Missy, where she's going to be talking about presentation strategies for the job search. With respect to the YouTube channel link, we'll be dropping that in the chat. where it'll be posted. So it'll be posted on the Dubstack YouTube channel.
Yeah.
Let me give you
I
a
also
link.
want to mention this. Yeah, Zosh and the rest of the team at Dubstack, you know, these guys are doing literally God's work. This is my second year doing this hackathon or protothon, and it's better organized than most of the hackathons, if I'm being honest. And they're always super receptive to any of our feedback, you know, any of our requests with the music choice, emailed stuff. So yeah, I guess also give a round of applause to Zosh and the rest of the
Thank you,
team
Irem.
who's
That's very
helping with
sweet.
the hackathon. You know, they are pulling probably all-nighters to do all of this when they also have full-time jobs, schoolwork. So major kudos to you guys.
Thank you, Irem. That's very sweet. Okay, I'm gonna stop the session recording now, and